Hey guys, and welcome to Sasquatch Odyssey. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to listen to the show. This is the bonus show for the week. We just put out Friday's show. It's now Sunday. I felt horrible about the audio quality on Friday's show. There was a lot of background noise with Gord and his grandkids, and we had some weird feedback thing going on. Probably the government listening in on the show with Richard in California. But I wanted to do another show for the week and put it out there so you guys would have some better audio quality. As always, I want to start the show by saying thank you, and if you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. You can get me at brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. So I have a huge ask of you guys. Wherever you listen to the show, whether it's Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're getting the show, take a few seconds and rate the show. Give us a 5-star rating. Take time, 30 seconds, and write a review. Give some honest feedback about the show. It makes a huge, huge difference, and I appreciate it very much. So if you guys would take the time to do that, that would be awesome. As I said, I wanted to do a bonus show. I'm bringing Flint on from Indiana. He's had a couple of encounters with Sasquatch over the years, and we talk about some interesting things. His Nephilim theory. We talk a little bit about DNA. So I hope you guys enjoy the show. We're just going to get right into it and bring Flint on. So welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate you having me on the air.
Absolutely, man. The pleasure is mine. So I know you've had some encounters with Sasquatch you're going to tell us about tonight. So why don't we just go ahead and get started, and you kind of tell us where you were, what you were doing, and what happened out there, man.
Okay. Well, I'm from Indiana, and we're not necessarily known for our Sasquatch sightings, but it's becoming quite a hot spot here recently, mostly in southern Indiana, but I'm from Midwestern Indiana, kind of right in the center. But my sightings began when I was around, I think it was 10 years old. Now, this wasn't a sighting, but it was definitely an experience that propelled me into the world of Bigfoot Sasquatch. We lived out in the country. We had 5-acre woods, and then there was a large farm field behind it, and then about a half mile or so out was another woods with a creek. And me and my little brother, had ventured back there. That was back when it was safe to play outside and wander around. But we had found some human-looking tracks, and it was late fall, and it was kind of odd to us, like who would be walking out here barefooted, and and we followed them down, and they went through the creek, and I thought, wow, this is really crazy. So we followed the track to the other side of the creek, and when we got to the other side, there were 2 cows, full-grown cows, that had been killed. Their necks were broken, and they were gutted like you would gut a deer or field dress it. And the organs were missing out of the inside of it. And the tracks were surrounding these cows. So that, of course, that freaked us out really bad. And so we ran back home and told my dad, and he called the authorities. And they came in and they destroyed the cows, but they never gave us any explanation as to what happened. My dad didn't really want to talk about it. And so it kind of was a moot point. Now, about around that time period, there had been some Bigfoot sightings in the area, just only a couple of miles from that particular area. But nobody else seemed to draw the link to it, and maybe I didn't at that age, but as I got older, it all started kind of to come together for me. And I think, and I've talked with other squatchers about it, and they think that it could have been most definitely Bigfoot. What could break a cow's neck like that? Certainly not a human. Anyway, as I got older, I'd been interested in this since I was a kid, and we'd go to the library, and there was very limited amount of material on Sasquatch in the 70s. Maybe Leonard Nimoy and In Search Of and those types of things, or the $6 Million Man or something like that, But as I got older, it was about 25 years ago when I had my first head-to-toe or head-to-foot sighting.
Before we get into that, could I go back to the footprints that you guys saw around the cows and stuff? What did the footprints look like? How big were they? Were they human-like tracks? Kind of describe those, if you would.
Well, they were now, in hindsight, as I've seen Sasquatch tracks, that's exactly what they looked like. They didn't have arches. They were flat-footed, and they were huge tracks. I would probably say, 15, 16, 17 inches long, looking back at it now. And but there was only one set. It was one individual that made the tracks. There wasn't several different sizes.
The tracks have always fascinated me because there's so many sightings where there's like one or two, and there's not really multiple. So I'm always interested in encounters like you had or experiences like you had when there's multiple tracks where something has clearly walked around, and then the power it would take to break a cow's neck. I couldn't even fathom that. So I can only imagine what it was going through your mind as a 10-year-old seeing that. That's got to be pretty wild.
It scared us to death. We had no concept of what we were dealing with at that age. There was dozens of tracks. We had followed this set of tracks. That's what led us to the cow, and we were trying to figure out who would be walking out here barefooted. And they were deep tracks too. Not just, surface tracks. These were at least an inch, some maybe 2 deep, really deep in the creek bed.
So I guess you went back and told your parents, and then you said they were the ones who called the authorities, and they gave no explanation other than just destroying the bodies, which I find is a little weird.
Well, yeah, because, I asked, I was like, Dad, what happened? What happened to those cows? And he just said, I don't know, son. And he said, let's just leave it at that. And that was the end of it.
Do you think he knew more than he was letting on at the time?
Absolutely. I do think he knew more than he was leading on as he got older, because we were avid hunters. We grew up hunting. And he had told me that he had thought that he had seen a Sasquatch down in Kentucky on a dove hunting trip, but he never said anything to anybody because he didn't want to hear the ridicule and stuff. And he really didn't go into any detail about it. But after I told him about my sighting is when he kind of fessed up to his.
That tends to happen a lot, I've found, over the course of doing the show and interviewing folks. That happens often. Somebody shares something with somebody, and then they're like, well, there was that one time I saw this or whatever. So that was sort of your introduction and your first sort of experience with these things. What was your next encounter?
Well, I was, let's see, it was about 25 years ago. So I was roughly 26 or 27, maybe 28. And I was up at his game reserve known as Missinawall in Indiana. It has a huge lake, and it has some hunting areas that are managed by DNR. And me and a buddy of mine, we'd go hunting up there every year, dove hunting in particular. I was never a big deer hunter or anything, but we had been out in the field and dove hunting, and it was starting to get dusk. It was about the end of the day. The birds quit flying, and we're walking back. I had a 1985 Chevy Chevette. If that tells you anything. This was in the 90s, though. But a Chevette is a smaller car. This was a 4-door, and it was brown. So anyway, we parked on the lane, and as we were walking towards the car, my buddy, who was a former Green Beret, and he's a really legit guy, right? He's passed on now, but he just froze, and he turned just white as a sheet. And I'm like, what's wrong, bro? What is wrong? You know, I could tell something was immediately wrong. He had this look of just sheer terror on his face. And I looked up, and it wasn't 125 feet in front of us, maybe, was this enormous, I don't think, is all I can tell you at the time, walking, just gliding down the lane, and it was light brown in color, and it was walking right towards the car. Now, on the other side of the lane in the car was a ravine that went down, and there was a creek that runs in the middle of it, and then it goes off into the woods. And as this being walked, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, I can't even hardly explain it. It was like you're almost in an alternate reality. Is this really happening? And time kind of just froze. And then I watched it walking, and when it got to the car, its waist, or what I consider its waist, was above the roof of the car. And that's how I got kind of the size of it. It was about 9 foot tall, and it was, I hate using it, but it didn't really have a neck. Its hair was really long and up around its head down to its shoulders, but not all over its body. That's the way it appeared to me, like almost like a rock star from the 80s is what I can best describe it looking to me. And then when it turned to look at us, the face was smooth black, but it did have like a beard. I couldn't really see its eyes. It just seemed like they were dark. But it looked like a human face to me. It wasn't ape-like or anything. But though I look back, it was just enormous. But it was proportioned right. But I couldn't believe how long the legs were and how long everything. The arms were extremely long too. But it was thick, like the thickness of the car. It was as wide as the car door. The thickness of it was. Does that make any sense?
It does. That's pretty big.
It was enormous, and then after it turned and seen us, it shot down that ravine and into the woods and disappeared. And we after we got ourselves together, we went, and there was prints in the lane and that were enormous. I would say almost 20 inches long, and then it was gone. And my buddy and I said, we discussed it. He said, I don't ever want to talk about this to anybody. I don't ever want to, because I don't want to hear it. We'll never hear the end of it. They'll never believe us. You know what I mean? They're never going to believe us. Flint, please don't tell anybody about this. And if you do, leave my name out of it, because I don't want to talk about it. And he never did. He never did talk about it. Only with me, and that was briefly. He just didn't want to talk about it. It altered him. And it altered me too, but in a different way. I wanted to know more,
I think that's a very common thing. It has one of those two effects on everybody that it has an encounter with these things. It's either it drives you to want to see it again, want to understand what you saw, or it is a complete and utter shutdown, 100%. That didn't happen. We're not talking about that kind of thing. So let's go back to the sighting for a second. And sure. I know you were some distance away. Did you get a good look at the face of this thing? Could you describe the face and kind of tell us any details? Was it more ape-like, more human-like, or what were you able to see from that distance?
No, it was more human than ape at all. I don't I didn't see any ape. I think the reason people use ape-like is because that's the closest thing that they can reference, in comparison. This looked like a enormous human being, but the nose was wide, but the nostrils were down. They weren't flared out, like a monkey's or an ape would be. The eye sockets were sunken in and dark. That's the best I can tell you about the eyes. And the mouth was wide, very wide, but the lips were thin. They weren't bulbous or anything like that, or really full. They were flat. And they did have a brow ridge and a forehead, but it was very brief. The face was, I didn't get to see the face for very long. I just remember the body and mostly in the size of it. I just couldn't get over the size of it. When I told you that just a second ago, my hair stood up all over my body, because I don't talk about it very often. It's not something that comes up in normal conversation most of the time.
Right. I try to talk Sasquatch with some people, and it ends the conversation pretty quickly. So I totally get that.
But I thank God I have a lot of friends who are Squatchers, and we're able to speak freely without condemnation, and it's becoming more an accepted topic, and more people are coming out, and more publicity is given to the subject, and I'm thankful, because I'm sure that there are thousands of cases and sightings that have been suppressed, and maybe even evidence, and I'm sure there is pictures and evidence that is suppressed because people don't want to go through it. No matter how good the picture is, it's not going to be good enough.
Yeah, I agree. And that's one of the reasons that I started the show, was to give people a space to come on and tell their stories, because I believe, in my opinion, that these anecdotal eyewitness accounts are some of, if not the best evidence that we have to prove that these things exist. There's film, there's the Patterson-Gimlin film, there's foot castings, footprints, pictures, tons of stuff. But we learn the most, in my opinion, from eyewitness accounts, because you get the most detail about not only what they look like, but how they behave and where they're at, the areas that they're seeing. I just think the eyewitness testimony is so important. And I always commend anyone who's willing to come on the show and share their story, because I say it over and over. I know people get tired of hearing me say this, but for everybody you hear on the show, I've probably talked to 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 people that just won't come on because they're that ridicule factor, or, they don't want people to think they're crazy. So that's what the show's about, man, is the encounter story. So I really appreciate you sharing it.
I'm thankful that, you're giving us a voice for those who have the courage to come on your show and talk about it. And that's one of the reasons I did it, to let everybody know you're not crazy, that what you saw, and it's okay. People know if it's a bear, they know what they've seen, and there's so much gaslighting that goes on, and skepticism that's why people don't do it. But I have an area that I study in a research area now that I have set up, and I just started the gifting process, and it's been a pretty active area. Just this past week, we got our first tree knocks that were initiated by them, not us. And we get hoops all the time. But I had my first vocalization last Saturday, and it was a massive vocalization as we were leaving the woods after we'd left our gifts and things. And here's a funny story, is that my son and his girlfriend or fiance are skeptics, and I was standing there talking to him at the farmhouse. It's on our family farm, and my grandson is 7 years old, and he's my research partner, which is kind of funny, but he's very well versed in what he's doing, and he knows what he's doing. And when that vocalization happened from about, I don't know, a quarter mile away, and it was so loud, you should have seen the expressions on their faces. And they asked, what in the world was that? And I told them, well, Ezra, my grandson, told them what it was. The next morning, I get a text from my son. He said, hey, Dad. He said, I'm out looking for Bigfoot. And I had to laugh because he was a skeptic up until that point. And then he heard that vocalization, and that changed his mind. He was out in the woods the very next morning.
Yeah, it's like when you get that taste of Sasquatch, it can drive you insane because the wanting the next thing or wanting the next vocalization or wanting the next sighting, it just drives people to go out all the time. What do you make of the gifting thing? You're leaving things for them in the woods? Are they reciprocating? Are they taking the things that you're leaving? I'm always very curious about the gifting because I really don't know what to make of that. I've talked to several people I've had on the show, one of which is sort of a habituation type thing. He's feeding these things on his property and he's leaving them things. He didn't really say they were leaving him things, as I remember. But what do you make of the gifting, and how is that working for you? Are you seeing them take the things? Are they leaving you things in return?
Well, this is the first time that we've started the gifting process. And I'm trying different gifts. Jars of peanut butter, and I don't leave them wide open, of course, because of other animals. But I'll unscrew the lid just a little bit. Apples. And see, the problem with food is that it can be tampered with by all other wildlife that's out there. But I started leaving small, shiny trinkets and balls. Now, I'm going back out to check tomorrow. It's been a week. This is the first that I've tried it. So I don't know. I'm getting ready to find out, but I'd be more than happy to let you know exactly what I find out. Now, we found tracks. We've got tree structures. We've got breaks. I've got some really awesome things that they've done with that. I've been able to rule out natural, but the tree bands that we have, and then they'll trap it underneath something else and pin it down, or I find 6, 7, 8 foot sticks that's been jammed down into the ground 7 or 8 inches, in different places. They're becoming more and more active, and they're becoming more and more receptive of us being there. And when they initiated the knocks last weekend, that's what propelled me to start, because I never did tree knocks. I just didn't, It just wasn't my thing, I just didn't do it. And then, one knock is one thing. It can be a branch breaking, but when you get several knocks or clacks in a row, that there's something out there doing it. It's not a woodpecker. It's not, this is very distinctive. And it's some of them you get the rock clacking together. We have a Pipe Creek runs through our property. It runs right through the center of the woods, and it goes all the way to the Wabash River, up towards Miss Cinewell Game Reserve. And I think that it's a travel way for these beings. And we have maybe a 40-acre wooded area that has water on both sides, and I believe that they habituate in the center. And the creek protects them from my side, and the lake on the other side protects them from anybody coming in. But it's all private property. Nobody ever goes back except us.
I'm always curious about the tree knocks. I talked to, I don't know if you're familiar with Sasquatch Evidence of an Enigma, Carter Burchard's book, but I talked to Carter. I interviewed him several weeks back. He has a theory about the wood knocks, and he believes that Sasquatch use those sort of as a counting way to count people and things in the woods. It's sort of a communication thing with them, but he believes that they're signaling each other, because he's had encounters in the past where he was like with a group of 6 people, and as he was walking off, there was like a 5 wood knocks, which would sort of signal to him that there was 5 people left or whatever. I'm curious, what do you have any opinion on what do you think the wood knocks are? Do you think they're communicating with each other? They're trying to communicate with us? What is your opinion on that?
My buddy Leo Frank, I don't know if you're familiar with Leo or not. He's got a new book out called Sasquatch Family Ties, And he said that they would start knocking whenever he would go into his research site, and he thinks that they're communicating with each other as well. I don't have any other explanation for it. They may be trying to communicate with us, but I think it's more amongst themselves.
Yeah, I don't even really have an opinion one way or the other. I'm just always curious as to what people think. I think it could be a combination of several of those things. It's curious that I've heard other people talk about the fact that the wood knock sort of phenomena was something that some people, in their opinion, was created by like the BFRO, Matt Moneymaker, and the Finding Bigfoot folks, because they had to have some way to have something to put on television because it's been on for how many seasons and they've never found Bigfoot, but they get wood knocks, right? But I've also heard too many folks that actually go out and do the investigations, people I know, people I trust, and people that I know are doing real work, and some of the people that have these things on their property talk about the tree knock, so I know that they do it. It interests me to try to speculate, I guess, or form an opinion about why.
I think there's definitely manipulation on that particular show, like you said, to give the audience something, but then again, I seen Cliff Barrickman on a different show up in Alaska walking around with a baseball bat doing tree knocks. So he seems to believe in it wholeheartedly. It's just not something that I ever did until recently when they initiated it. So I don't know if they were talking to me or they were talking amongst themselves. I don't have any idea. I don't think any of us really do. But
yeah, that's the thing about it. It's all speculation at this point, right?
It really is. And there's a lot of it, and I try not to take sides. The thing about this subject is you have to have an open mind. I've got my own theories on what these beings are, and through various researches and DNA studies and the things that a lot of people are putting a lot of effort into it. But mainstream science is afraid of this subject, I believe, and they don't really want to publish their true findings, I think, because they're afraid that they're going to lose funding. That's what I believe. I believe that they know more. Definitely the government knows more than they're leading on. And if we'll ever get the truth from those people, I really don't know.
I tend to agree with that. I've had Dr. Jeff Meldrum on the show, and he's a reputable guy. I mean, he's pretty reputable. He's sort of by the book. He believes in the evidence, and he doesn't speculate too far out there on some of the other theories or whatnot. But it was amazing. I mean, the show everybody loved the show. It was an extremely popular show, but I got so many folks in the groups on Facebook and whatnot that were commenting about Dr. Meldrum's theories, and that he knows more than he's letting on, and he's not saying this, that, or the other. And I didn't get that from him. We had quite an extensive conversation, and I just didn't feel that from him. I think he wholeheartedly believes that these things are real. I mean, he stated that on the show. It's just difficult for scientific people to talk about non-scientific things in public. I just talked to, I don't know if you're familiar with Kathy Strain, but I just talked to Kathy a couple of days ago, and I sort of started talking about some of the, what I call the woo-woo. We sort of got sidetracked and talked about some of the more paranormal things that are often associated with Bigfoot sightings. And Kathy said, I believe that most of the time there are rational explanations. And she gave me an example of being out with a friend of hers, or I don't know if it was a friend or she was following up on a report. But either way, this guy said he had seen lights in the woods and he had seen a Bigfoot. And she said she went out and eventually figured out that what he had seen were lightning bugs, and this guy had never seen lightning bugs because they didn't have them where he was from. Now, do I believe that everything? I have talked to people on this show that have absolutely experienced orbs, they've experienced extremely bright lights in the sky, and they're having Sasquatch encounters on their property. They're not seeing lightning bugs. And that stuff is real, and it's happening. And I think you said something pretty profound earlier. You've got to keep an open mind when you're dealing with this subject, because if you've got your mind closed to any possibility, right? I'm in the camp that these things are flesh and blood creature. I think there's some sort of relic hominid. That's my opinion today.
Right.
You may ask me 5 days from now, and that opinion may change. I talked to Ron Moorhead,
I
talked to Ron, and Ron has some pretty out there theories about what these creatures can do, what he's experienced in the Sierra Mountains with these creatures. And for that's his reality. That's real. And I believe that. I love Ron to death. I believe wholeheartedly everything he says because I think he's a genuine guy. But I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of the mind speak and the light. I don't know if it's a coincidence or there's some connection. I just don't know. Nobody does, really. But I leave my mind open because anything's possible, right?
That's absolutely right. In the grand scheme of things, we know about 3% or maybe 7% of what's really in our universe, So that means we don't know a lot, to be honest. We know what we know. I'm friends with Dr. Meldrum on Facebook. I think he's an open book. I think he's legitimate in his beliefs. He's an evolutionist, and he believes, that it's probably Gigantopithecus. There's a lot of people in that particular camp. I'm from a different camp. I don't believe in evolution and never have. And I have my reasons, but mostly because they've never found anything becoming something else and all of the fossil findings. But I'm kind of in this. I'm probably going to open a whole Pandora's box here, but I'm kind of in the Nephilim camp because that would explain some of the supernatural abilities that they might have, their size, and the DNA studies kind of suggest that. Scott Carpenter is a friend of mine, and he's written several books extensively on the subject, of course. And then Dr. Ketchum's findings on the subject as well. They've got the DNA, and they know that the mother side is 99%. The mitochondrial DNA is from the mother side, and it's 99% human. However, the nuclear DNA on the father's side is from an unknown origin. And they, of all the databases, of all the DNA, they cannot place the nuclear DNA. So that leaves a lot of doors open there. And that's all scientifically, proven, and the evidence is there. Nobody really wants to talk about it. And I'm not 100% either way. The door's still open. My mind's still open. I'm just saying I'm kind of leading in that direction because that's what the science is suggesting.
And I tend to agree with that. I don't know where I'm at with the Nephilim thing. I did reach out. I talked to Dr. Ketchum several days back and invited her on the show. She's not going to do any interviews right now because she's doing a new study and she's trying to get funding and she's trying to complete the study so she can present new findings. I know she has some pretty interesting findings that she's chomping at the bit to prove, but we're not going to find out what that is until she's completely done because she's not going to come out and say one thing or the other because she's been trashed so bad in the past.
Oh, horribly.
She's been dragged through the mud, and I think...
And it wasn't her fault. She was brought into it by Josh on Expedition Unknown or whatever the heck it's called. And he brought her in to do the study of the Yeti findings that he had. So strictly, she went into it with the best of intentions, and that led her down a horrible road. She got horrible.
And that happens in this community, man. It's cutthroat. I've seen that firsthand over the last couple of months. It's definitely a cutthroat community. And I really don't understand that. It's one of the biggest mysteries outside of solving the mystery of Sasquatch. It's a mystery to me how people involved in this type of community and this type of work and this type of interest in a subject like a cryptid can be so divisive and so quick to just tear people apart because they don't believe the same thing that they believe. It just fascinates me.
It seems to be the mindset of the era. It's the same in politics or anything else. And it's either you're on my side or you're my enemy. And I don't get it, brother. I never have got it. I welcome all theories. I welcome, all, because we don't know, we don't know. And for sure. So I want to hear it all. I want to, if you've got something, lay it out there and let's take a look at it. And I've got friends in this whole big spectrum of the Bigfoot Sasquatch from every different, I don't know what you would call them, contingent. And I don't take sides. I like the people for themselves. And I think that's what we need to get back to, so we can start sharing with each other from an objective point of view. We can come together and like true science, and let the facts speak for themselves.
Very well said, man. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's one of the most important things that people in this community can do for themselves, and frankly for the movement of proving these things. I think that's the end result for everybody who's interested in this, is we just want it to be proven and we want to know what it is. And everybody that goes out and does the research and does the hard work and they bring back phenomenal evidence. I mean, there are guys that I know that have phenomenal pictures and videos and audio recordings. They don't share them with anybody because the second they do, they're torn apart. It's not real. You're a hoaxer. It's fake. So they just keep it to themselves. And their answer is, you know what? I don't need to show you because I have it. I've seen it. And I know it's real. And the rest of us suffer.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. There's people out there who have tremendous evidence, but they just won't share it with anybody. Steve Ishtal did a whole show about it the other day. Was talking about that. He's seen the pictures. He's seen from multiple people, and they just absolutely don't want to share it because they don't want to be trashed. And it's terrible. Because I'd love to see it, I really would. But who knows? Maybe someday we'll know the answers to these questions.
Absolutely, man. And I'll have to go do a UFO podcast or something. I'll be out of business here. Yeah. But that'll be okay with me. I'll figure out something else. This isn't my day job, so I'll be okay.
Yeah, you'd be all right. Yeah. Thank God it's not our day job because it don't pay that well.
Exactly. It costs me way more money than I'll ever make doing it, I assure you.
Amen. Me too. So that I can share with my grandson, and it's something that we can do together, and it gives me great joy. Absolutely, man. There's nothing like being out in the woods and getting away from the electronics and just unplugging and getting out and enjoying your family. I think it's great, man. I love it. And I love doing this show. I meet some great people. I get to talk to some fantastic witnesses and people like yourself who are out there with a level head and a open mind, exploring something that's very important to me. And I just connect with people on that level, man. I think it could bring us all together. It's a common thing and a common goal that we share. And I think a lot of people are missing the boat because they're out for just themselves. I couldn't agree more. And I'm so thankful and grateful that you invited me onto the show, brother, and give me a chance to ramble on a little bit about this subject, because I really, really, really enjoy it and love it, everything about it. And when you asked me to come on, I was really excited. Here's the first interview that I've done, or on any show actually. And I'm really thankful you asked me to come on. I really enjoyed having you on the show, and I thank you for sharing your story. Thank you. Thanks for having me. That's going to do it for the bonus show. Thank you guys so much for being here. Remember, if you've had an encounter you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email, brian@sasquatchodyssey.net. Have a great week, and we'll see you guys next time.